Hey, it's Tandy with Common Ground Alaska. I'm so glad that you have joined us for this show. I'm really excited to welcome Ashley Waligura. She reached out to me to talk about creative composting, and I just thought that sounded like such a fun subject that she was kind of a shoo-in. She also mentioned that she considers herself an accidental composter, which I just think that's got such a fun story behind it. So one thing you're going to love about Ashley's story is that she doesn't overcomplicate anything. She digs in and learns, but she isn't hard on herself when it doesn't go well. And as an Alaskan gardener, there's a lot of learning and a lot of trial and error. So I think that you're going to really be encouraged and learn a lot from this show. So Ashley, welcome to the show. I'm so glad that you're here. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself before we dig into composting?
Yeah. Hi, my name's Ashley Waligura. I live and garden in Eagle River, Alaska. I grew up in Texas with a family of gardeners, farmers, all of the above. My parents currently live on the land that was farmed by my family 130 some years ago. It's it's something that is a part of me that I didn't really realize until I started doing it all myself. So I bought myself a little house here in Eagle River on a quarter of an acre, knowing that that was enough space and it had enough light to put in garden beds, to use the greenhouse that's here, and hopefully add chickens. So I researched, I prepared, I started seeds under the grow lights. I put in my garden beds, and I paid a premium for my soil because it was supposed to be a half compost, half soil mix. Super excited about it. So I get it in, I get it into the beds. I put organic fertilizer, I get my seeds and all of my little baby plants tucked in, and I wait. And I wait and I wait and I wait. Nothing really grew. It was my first year and the soil was just not great. It needed help. And I really didn't want to add more chemicals to my world, to the world, to my backyard, anything like that. So I really kind of wanted to see, like, what can I do for this soil with what I have? I really like the idea of reducing my waste through recycling of metal, plastics, which are hard, glass, things like that. And I really kind of thought this might be a fun way to reuse some natural materials as well.
Okay, well, that's awesome. I think that that's such a fun story, and also, again, I really something I really appreciate you about you, and something I'm excited to dig in further is, a lot of times, just gardening in Alaska can be hard, and then when you're thrown a curveball of soil that was supposed to be something and maybe it's not, and
Mhm.
whatever, um, it just can be hard. Yeah. So, so you started composting. This is kind of your story of how you started
Yeah,
composting, but I feel like there's more. So go ahead and continue.
yeah, definitely. So on that whole imperfect approach, composting, like everything else, can look really hard, because everyone makes it look really hard. You need this really fancy container, or you need to put this specific water on it at this specific time. There's just a lot of rules to it, and that didn't necessarily work for me. Like, life doesn't fit that.
Yep, that's true. That's true. So you're so right about that. So let's talk about for just a minute about the science of composting.
Yeah. So composting is basically recycling natural materials back into your soil. It's a biological process, and it takes these natural existing microorganisms, worms and bacteria, and all these things that exist already, to break down organic materials like leaves, grass clippings, kitchen scraps, and for me, everything that came from my chicken coop.
Okay, very good. So if you okay, so you use everything out of your chicken coop. Tell me a little bit more about that. Like what's the process?
Yeah, so I do a deep litter method in my chicken coop, which means I really only clean it out like twice a year. I keep adding materials, and they kind of break down as time goes. They they keep the smells down, things like that, but I'm not replacing the materials every few weeks, especially in the winter. And so that material has to go somewhere. And you can either put it into a plastic bag and put it into the landfill, or you can do what I did the first time and just make a pile of it in the yard. I had no really idea what to do with it other than that. And prior to that, my boyfriend had been building my chicken coop, and he had come across this piece that he was just like, I just need to stop. Like, I just need to set this aside and start this shell of it again. And so I've got this weird piece of a chicken coop sitting here, and I've got this weird pile of materials, and was like, I could combine them. Like, why not compost that material? So that's literally just kind of where that started.
Oh man, that's so fun. That's so fun. So, okay, so back to the science of how it works.
Oh
So,
yeah, thank you.
um, yeah, so it looks like you have a little bit more to say about that. So so go ahead and continue.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so let's see. The we talked about the advantages of using that over a chemical fertilizer. So kind of the science of that is that it has a whole bunch of macro and micronutrients that the soil, the things in the soil can actually use, your plants can use, versus a bunch of synthetic things that they may not really know what to do with it. It also releases the nutrients really slowly into the ground, so you can kind of dress things with it and let it soak in, versus you're doing this huge hit of a specific like chemical or thing that you think your plants need. So yeah, it's really just taking that natural material and breaking it down. So there's a lot behind the science of you need this ratio of this kind of material versus this or that. But I've really found in my own composting here in Alaska, especially, is that you don't have to be quite as serious about that if you're willing to just give it time. Because Alaska seasons, we don't have a really long summer that everything's going to get broken down perfectly. We don't have that perfect long season. Apologies for my phone. We don't have that long season that things can really do that. And so giving it time, I found, was the number one thing that really made my compost wonderful. I could try to measure, this is 3 bags of grain grass clippings versus this many number bags of leaves and this amount of kitchen materials, which we've all been told is really important. I wonder if I could mute my computer. Because of course they just like keep texting. Apologies. We'll have to remove this. I think maybe they're done. Okay, so back to it. Yeah, so really the science behind it is that you just let the organisms do their thing. You can try to rush it with water, with heat, and all these things are really important. But if you don't have the time for those things, you can just let it sit and age, and that's great as well.
So I think that's part of your approach that I really appreciate. Yes, there are definitely ways that you can you can really be super proactive with your compost pile, and you can have those perfect layers. And yeah, and that's awesome. If that's and we'll definitely be talking to other composters too. But I love your approach of just get it's waste. So get rid of the waste, but make it work for you, and make it bring in your enhance what you're doing, your garden. I think that's super. There's just something so freeing about that concept of just letting it do its work.
It's probably my favorite. That idea of, yes, just maybe this will do it. There we go. Okay, now we're set. Yeah, the idea of it just being waste and it's either going to the landfill or not was kind of the best line for me at first. And then I was like, okay, yeah, all of this can go back there. And the really fun part was when my chickens learned what was going on back there. So I have backyard chickens, which is where a lot of those materials come from, and I let them free range the backyard. I fence off my garden beds. I have some currants that I let them snack on because I haven't fenced them yet. And I let them do their thing. And they figured out very quickly the compost bin was where the things were going down. they wanted in. So I let them. And at first it was just them kind of scratching in it. And eventually they really started to turn the pile themselves, looking for worms and snacks and things in it. So not only are they adding to it, by it's their straw and their waste that I'm cleaning out of the chicken coop and putting it and breaking down, they're also turning it for me. They're mixing it for me, they're adding to it. It's been ridiculously wonderful.
It's you make it sound so simple. You make something that and I keep saying this, but it's because we're in kind of that time where everyone feels kind of the pressure of doing the things and doing them perfect. And so you just make it sound so simple. So definitely just a couple of things if you're wanting to compost with chickens, we do the same thing. You mentioned fencing off your garden. Really
Yes.
important because your chickens, speaking from experience, your chickens when they get out, because maybe your kids are in charge of the chickens and they let the door open, chickens will go after your Swiss chard and they will decimate the whole season's worth of chard and kale like in no time. And not only that, but they'll poop all over it, which is fine in other spots, but I don't want them pooping on my stuff, like my lettuce and things that I was hoping to just eat raw without. Anyway, so fencing it off is important. But the other thing that you mentioned is just kind of letting them be, letting them do their thing. There's nothing you don't have to train them. Like this is they are so happy in there. But did you have some sort of sides on your did you put some sort of sides? We
I,
just okay, go ahead.
I do, yeah. So it was basically the top quarter of a chicken coop. That was framed out and just didn't work. So it has sides, and then it also has like mesh hardware cloth above it. So
Okay.
I've added perches for them to get in and out, but that also kind of it gets airflow. If it does get that high, you don't have a solid side, but also it just prevents other things from getting in as well. No animal is like hardware cloth. I'm excited about that.
That's true. That's very true. Yeah, we always jokingly say we have a big compost pile and I might offer, some like a top to a carrot or something to our dog in the house. And of course the dog wants nothing to do with it. But by golly, you put it in the compost pile and now he wants that carrot top. But yes, we did realize that we do let our chickens go into our compost pile, but you definitely want to have something just to contain it because their little scratching can spread it forever, way past their boundaries.
They absolutely will. And that's something I do with my leaves prior to putting them in the compost bin. So I leave them all fall, all winter, and then eventually I do start to get tired of them in the spring. So I'll pile them up and I literally just let the chickens go for it at first. That is their place to scratch and shred. And they really do break that down a lot before I ever add it to the compost bin.
That's really cool. And they get all I know, is it the birch that has the bugs in it? So I would think that they would eat those bugs out too, which is good before it goes in
They
your
do.
compost. Yeah.
They
Okay.
love bugs. They think the worms in the compost is the greatest thing on earth.
Yeah, they sure do. And it's neat because it's symbiotic, as my daughter would say. It's like, they're doing work for you, you're giving them good stuff. It's just it's pretty neat. Um, okay. So we have notes. I have no clue where we are. So
I
this
sure,
this has been a fun conversation. Um so tell me what words of advice would you have for someone who's just getting started with composting?
I think I made beautiful notes, but I think the first would really be to decide what's the goal of it. Do you just want to keep waste out of the landfill? Because there's a whole bunch of options for that. Do you want to, change your backyard with compost? That's an option too. And I kind of like the in between. So that's one as well. Really decide what your intention and goal is first. Because Anchorage has a wonderful composting plan if you don't have the space for one, which is great to know about. But also, yeah, just knowing what it is you want to do with it. I love the idea of reducing waste and started there, and now I make more than I can use in my friends as well.
Wow, that's pretty cool. That's really awesome. Okay, what else? Did you have any other advice for brand new people?
Yeah. Yeah, the big one was, yeah, how do you want to do it and why? But really keep it keep it simple. There's so many ways that you can use it, and there's so many ways that you can reduce your waste even without using it. So really just keep it simple. Give it time.
So you need to be turning, let's just get kind of down to the nitty-gritty of it for just a second. So with compost, you're piling all your waste. So you're bringing in your stuff from your chickens, you're bringing in your table scraps,
Mhm.
all of that's going in there, your leaves from your yard, probably like stems and things from your garden, like the waste from your garden is going in there. And then you need with if you don't have chickens to do the work for you, then you do need to be turning that occasionally. Um, and also I know that in an interview that I did with Jody Anderson, she talked a little bit about composting, and she was talking about keeping it wet as well.
Yes.
But again, that can be super simplified. You don't need to turn it daily. You just turn it every once in a while. And when you're out watering your garden, just run some water. If it's looking kind of dry, just run some water on your compost pile too, right? It's that simple.
Exactly that. Yeah, I just had a really good point and I apologize. I lost it in that. I was like, I'm listening. This is great. Gone.
That's okay. This is part of the reason that interviewing you is so fun, because it's just really real. But there's so many good nuggets in there. It's super helpful.
Okay.
So
Yeah. I just thought of it if you did want to add it.
oh yes.
So basically there's two styles of composting. There's the active, you turn it every day, you're really monitoring that heat, the water, all of that. And then
Mhm.
there's the passive composting, which is kind of what I've been doing in letting nature do it. So there's the active style where you are much more involved. It is considerably quicker. And then there is the simple make a pile in the backyard and just let it go option as well.
Okay, that sounds good. Now, if you do any parts of composting concern you?
So I live in Eagle River where there are bears. I see probably 3 bears a season in the neighborhood, and there are times when they are here every single day. So something that I really worried about the first season was the smell of compost, because I've heard that it gets smelly and I should worry about all of these things. And I was very lucky to not have any issues at all. I really do think that, like, being careful of with what you put in there, knowing you don't put meat products, you're
Right.
really just using basic things in there, and keeping an eye on it meant I didn't have that issue, but it was one that I really worried about.
Okay. Well, while we're talking about being just kind of being letting it kind of take care of itself, and being kind of free with it. I know you're not supposed to add meat to it, which I don't do because I really don't want the dogs in there. And I just don't understand why carrot tops attract them outside, but they do. But other than that, they leave it alone pretty good. But also I had heard that you weren't supposed to add citrus to your compost. But we compost, we have a 2 gallon bucket, and we take it outside once or twice a week. Plus that's not the chicken stuff, because we anything the chickens will eat go in the chicken scrap bucket, and then we have a different compost bucket. Um, and I just think through what can go in here that's not going to be smelly if it sits for a week. And that tends to be like meat would go rancid and be stinky and be
Mhm.
gross. And so we don't we don't put that in there. As far as citrus goes, I'm not that careful with citrus because we don't eat a lot of citrus. It's not like, I mean, the what it makes up in our, the tops and the outside rind of 1 or 2 lemons a week in that 2 gallon bucket really isn't gonna spoil anything, or but we'll put all of our potato skin goes in there. Onions and carrots and celery ends I usually throw in a bag and put in the freezer because I make bone broth out of that. So those go in the freezer. Bell peppers will go in there because your chickens, they say, aren't supposed to have bell peppers, so I try not to give my chickens nightshades. So those will go, just pretty much anything that can't go in the freezer for bone broth or go to the chickens goes to the compost except for meat. I haven't found anything really else that doesn't go in.
I haven't either. Oils, obviously, but no one wants to pour oil into it. So that works. I really haven't either. I haven't, I guess an avocado pit, obviously, you're gonna see for a few years in that pile. They just don't break down easily, but I use the same approach.
Yeah, that's true. Avocado pits, things like that really won't break down. Yeah. The and what I do with, if we have any oil or fats left over, that goes to the chickens anyway, because they like that, butter or those, solid oils, tallow or something.
They love it all. That was something that I was really surprised about in getting chickens. Like, oh, they're not vegetarian. They'll eat almost anything. They love to catch mice. Like they want to be out there foraging for their food.
Yes, it's true. Okay, so I think that we've pretty much wrapped it up. I really think that this has been informational because hopefully if someone was kind of daunted by the idea of composting, um, this was just kind of a free and just really no stress approach to just getting started. We definitely, I have a couple of people that I'm talking to about composting that definitely kind of get a little bit more scientific. And if that's something that you're wanting to do, then we'll have those available for you too, and potentially even an in-person class for composting. But I think for most of us, this time of year is so busy and we just want to get going. And so if you start composting now, the next year, as you're adding to that pile all spring and all summer and all winter with your table scraps and stuff, next next spring, you could potentially have a really great compost pile. One thing that Jody had mentioned, and I'm not sure how you go about this, but she mentioned starting her idea was you like if you're starting now, to go maybe compost like through July or August in one spot and then just leave that and start a new one maybe in August, the middle of August, start a brand new one because that pile is not going to be sitting long enough to actually be usable. So you've got next year's compost that may not be all that much, but it's a good start. And then, towards the end of summer, you start a brand new pile that you're adding stuff in all fall, and then all winter you're adding to it, and then in the spring. And that actually, so you've got your one pile that you start this year that's for your 2024 garden, and then in August you're starting for your 2025 garden. So that's something to think about too. So you're not putting fresh compost. We even put eggshells in our compost. That was another thing we throw in there.
I do the same. I don't know how many make it in the compost and how many the chickens eat. So I'm sure to kind of grind them up really small. But again, it's something good going into their body or into the soil versus into the landfill. So I feel good about it.
That's right. That's exactly right. Okay. Well, Ashley, this has been really, really informative. This has been a whole lot of fun. I appreciate you sharing your knowledge and your wisdom with folks. And yeah, and hopefully we get to talk to you again soon.
Of course, thank you.